Welcome to the Maiden Bloomsbury podcast. I'm Michael, your host, and today we're diving into a topic that's making waves on both sides of the Atlantic: carbon tariffs. Specifically, the United States' aggressive move with the Foreign Pollution Fee Act and the European Union's internal struggles over their carbon border adjustment mechanism, or CBAM for short. Let's start with the US. This new draft of the Foreign Pollution Fee Act is a major shift. It introduces a 15% carbon tariff on key imports. Things like aluminium, cement, steel, fertilizer, glass, and hydrogen. On top of that, there's a 40% surtax that kicks in based on how carbon intensive these goods are. The numbers are staggering. This policy is expected to bring in 212.8 billion between 2026 and 2035. That's a lot of money and a lot of leverage in trade negotiations. But it's not all good news. The same analysis points out that the US economy could take a hit, potentially losing 16.6 billion in GDP by 2035. So while this tariff is designed to encourage greener practices, it's also raising concerns about economic competitiveness. Who's going to feel the impact of these tariffs? Well, major trading partners like China, Canada, India, the European Union, and Mexico, top of the list. China, in particular, will be hit hard, accounting for almost 23% of the tariff revenue. Canada follows with 13.4%. India isn't far behind at 9.1%. Then there's the issue of effective tax rates. Russia, interestingly enough, faces the highest rate at 14.9%. Why? Because their trade with the US has been declining, making the tariff more punitive. For India, it's 3.2%, and for China, 1.6%. And let's not forget perception. Internationally, this move could be seen as protectionism, especially since the US doesn't impose any similar carbon pricing on goods produced at home. You can imagine how that's going over with their trading partners. Now, while the US is charging ahead, the European Union is caught in a bit of a mess with their CBAM plan. For those unfamiliar, CBAM is the EU's version of a carbon tariff designed to protect its industries from being undercut by cheaper, high carbon imports. But here's the problem: the European People's Party, or EPP, is now proposing a 2 year delay. Their argument: competitiveness. They're worried this mechanism could hurt European industries already struggling under the weight of high energy prices and stricter climate regulations. However, not everyone's on board with that delay. Industry groups like the SEM Bureau, which represent the cement industry, Eurofer, representing the steel sector, are sounding the alarm. They believe a delay would derail critical investments in decarbonization and ultimately harm Europe's long term competitiveness. The European Commission is feeling the pressure too. They're being pushed to simplify the CBAM process to ease the burden on industries, but no official decision on a delay has been made, at least not yet. So here we are. The US is leading what many are calling the era of green mercantilism, essentially using climate policies to assert trade dominance. While the EU finds itself stuck in internal debates, it is a fascinating contrast in strategies. On one hand, you have the US moving quickly to use carbon tariffs as a tool to drive change, possibly giving its industries an edge in a world that's increasingly demanding sustainable practices. On the other, the EU, long seen as a climate policy leader, risks falling behind due to political infighting, bureaucratic delays. The big question is, will these carbon tariffs push global trade toward greener practices? Will they ignite new trade tensions and economic struggles? There is a fine line between incentivizing sustainability and triggering protectionist backlash, and that's where the debate really heats up. Personally, I think both regions have a lot at stake here. The US might set a precedent with these aggressive policies, but the backlash from trading partners could lead to retaliation. Meanwhile, the EU risks undermining its leadership on climate policy if it can't get its act together. That's not even touching on the impact this could have on developing countries that are already vulnerable to trade barriers. So, what do you think? We witnessing a new era of environmentally driven trade, or is this just another chapter in the long history of trade wars dressed up with a green label? Love to hear your thoughts. You could reach out on LinkedIn or write a comment below. Substack.